"She's alive," the little street urchin declared to the millionaire, standing before his daughter's body, recently pronounced deceased by the doctors. He then asked them to remove the plastic sheeting from the body, and they discovered something shocking. Comment and give my story a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The silence in the hospital corridor of the great industrial metropolis was broken only by the distant echo of hurried footsteps and the constant hum of medical equipment. The widowed millionaire, in his early 30s, stood motionless before the room's doorway, his blue eyes fixed on the small body covered by white sheets. His 4-year-old daughter lay there, still as a broken porcelain doll, and each passing second tore away another piece of his soul. His fortune, built through shrewd investments on Wall Street, his investments in Bitcoin that had multiplied his wealth, none of it mattered now. All the money in the world couldn't bring back the crystal-clear laughter that had echoed through the halls of his mansion just a week ago. The chief of staff had been clear and definitive. There was nothing more to be done. The tears he had been trying to contain since morning finally began to stream down his face when a sharp cry cut through the heavy air of the hospital. A small girl, so frail she looked barely 2 despite being 4, burst into the corridor running barefoot. Her torn and dirty clothes contrasted sharply with the sterile environment, and her tangled hair swung wildly as she headed straight for the room. "She's still breathing," the little street urchin cried, pushing the door open and pointing to the bed. "I can feel it. She's still here." The well-dressed man turned, confused and irritated by the intrusion. Hospital security was already approaching to remove the child, but something in the desperate urgency of her voice made him hesitate. The girl's eyes shone with an unquestionable certainty, and she approached the bed fearlessly. "You don't understand," he murmured, his voice hoarse with grief. "The doctors have already confirmed it. She's gone." The urchin shook her head vigorously, placing her small, dirty hand on the sheet. "No, no, no. I know when someone's really gone. I've lived on the streets a long time, seen lots of people go, but she's still fighting in there." The chief of staff appeared at the door, drawn by the commotion. His expression showed irritation at the street child's presence, but her insistence intrigued him. During his 20 years of practice, he had learned that sometimes the subtlest signs could be perceived by those least expected. "Doctor, please," the father pleaded, grabbing the doctor's arm. "Check again. She says there are still signs." With a heavy sigh, the doctor approached the bed and began a more thorough examination. His experienced fingers searched for almost imperceptible pulses, his ears focused on the faintest sounds. Minutes that seemed like an eternity passed until his eyes widened. "There is a pulse," he whispered, reaching for his stethoscope. "Very faint, almost undetectable, but it's there." The millionaire's world stopped for a moment before exploding in a mixture of relief and terror. His daughter was alive, but in such a delicate state that the line between life and death was as thin as a silk thread. The doctor immediately called the medical team, and the room filled with professionals racing against time. Throughout the commotion, the little urchin remained there, watching with a wisdom disturbing for her age. When they finally managed to stabilize the girl's vital signs, confirming that she was in a deep coma, the father turned to the child who had saved his daughter. "How did you know?" he asked, kneeling to be at her height. The urchin's eyes filled with an ancient sadness. "My mum worked here. She was a nurse. Before she passed, she taught me how to feel when someone's still fighting to stay. I spent a lot of nights on the streets watching, learning." The man felt a pang in his chest. Here was a child who had lost everything, who lived on the cold streets of the city, and yet had rushed to save the life of a stranger. His wealth, accumulated through years of successful business deals, seemed insignificant compared to the pure generosity of that little soul. "What's your name?" he asked gently. I don't use a name, she replied, lowering her eyes. On the street. Names don't matter much. And where do you live? The urchin pointed vaguely towards the window. Around, near the dumpsters behind the hospital. There's a place where the wind doesn't blow so much. The millionaire's heart broke a little more. While his daughter fought for her life in a hospital bed, protected by all the comfort his money could buy, this brave girl slept in the open air, protected only by her own courage. You saved my daughter, he said, his voice choked. How can I thank you? For the first time, a small smile appeared on the child's dirty face. Can I stay here sometimes? To make sure she's okay? I promise I won't bother anyone. The man nodded, not knowing that this simple question would change their lives forever. That night, as he watched over his daughter's artificial sleep, he watched from the window, the small figure huddled near the dumpsters, and a decision began to form in his mind. But there was something in the urchin's eyes, an iron determination, that told him that convincing her to accept help would not be a simple task. The following days turned into a routine that the millionaire never imagined living. Every morning, upon arriving at the hospital, he found the little urchin sitting in the corridor, leaning against the wall next to the room's door. She never asked for anything, just stayed there, whispering softly through the crack of the ajar door. On the third morning, his curiosity overcame his hesitation. He approached silently and managed to hear what the girl was saying. They were simple stories about birds that flew high in the sky, about the sun that warmed the stones of the street, about small flowers that grew between the cracks in the asphalt. Her voice carried a sweetness that contrasted drastically with the harshness of her reality. "Why do you tell those stories?" he asked, sitting on the floor beside her. The urchin looked at him with her large, serious eyes. "My mom always said that people who are sleeping really deep need to hear beautiful things to want to wake up. She said that when she was very sick, the stories helped her not to give up." The man felt a lump in his throat. "Your mom, she worked here?" "Yes, she took care of the children upstairs. She always came home telling about the little ones who got better because someone talked to them." The girl paused, running her hand over the cold floor. "She got sick and came here as a patient. I stayed outside, just like I'm doing now. And then..." The child's eyes filled with tears that she quickly wiped away with her torn sleeve. "Then she went to heaven. But before, she taught me everything she knew about taking care of people. She said I had a special gift for feeling when someone needed help." During the following weeks, the millionaire began to arrive earlier at the hospital, bringing small snacks to share with the urchin. He discovered that she was incredibly intelligent, absorbing medical information that she overheard from the professionals passing through the corridors. She memorized medication schedules, understood equipment, and could even predict when a patient was improving just by watching the movements of the medical team. But it was in the fourth week that the real turning point happened. The millionaire had just received a disturbing call from his financial manager. The costs of the experimental treatment he had requested for his daughter were consuming his fortune much faster than anticipated. His stock holdings would need to be liquidated, part of his Bitcoin holdings would have to be sold, and even then it wouldn't be enough to maintain the level of care he desired. "Trouble?" asked the urchin, noticing his worried expression. He hesitated, then decided to be honest. "The treatment is costing a lot of money. More than I imagined." To his surprise, the girl didn't seem impressed with the amount of money involved. Instead, she tilted her head thoughtfully. "There's a lady who lives in the neighborhood where I used to stay. She took care of my mum when other doctors gave up. Never charged anything, just asked people to help her in other ways." "What kind of lady?" "Retired nurse, very old, but very wise. She knows tricks that young doctors don't learn in school." The urchin paused, looking through the window. "But she only helps those who really need it, and who are willing to work for what they want. The man's pride wrestled with his despair. His whole life had been built on his ability to solve problems with money, to buy solutions. The idea of asking for help from a stranger, of admitting that his wealth wasn't enough, churned his stomach. "Do you think she would see me?" he asked finally. The urchin smiled for the first time since they met. "She welcomes anyone who comes with the right heart. But there's one thing." "What?" "She'll want you to prove that you're not trying to buy the cure. She hates rich people who think money solves everything." That night, after much hesitation, the millionaire followed the urchin's vague directions to a neighborhood he had never set foot in. The streets were narrow, the houses small and poorly maintained, and the smell of cheap food mixed with dampness hung in the air. He found the house with the indicated number, a simple construction with a garden full of medicinal plants. The door was opened by a lady with completely white hair, wearing a floral apron and thick glasses. Her eyes examined him from head to toe, clearly noticing his expensive clothes and gold watch. "You must be the father of the girl in the hospital," she said, without inviting him in. "How do you know?" "The little one from the street told me about you. Said you're rich, but the money is running out because you want to save your daughter." The lady crossed her arms. "She also told me that you're proud and that it would probably take you weeks to come here." The millionaire felt exposed, as if this stranger could read his thoughts. "The girl said you could help." "I can, but not in the way you're used to." The retired nurse finally stepped away from the door. "Come in, but leave the wallet in the car. In here, your money is worth nothing." The interior of the house was simple but impeccably clean. The walls were covered with photographs of children, old medical certificates, and dried plants hanging in small bouquets. The lady led him to a small table in the kitchen. "I knew the mother of the girl who saved your daughter," she began, serving a strong tea in chipped cups. "She was one of the best nurses I've ever seen. Developed her own techniques for dealing with patients in a coma, especially children." "What kind of techniques?" "Specific sensory stimuli, music at particular frequencies, touches at pressure points, even aromas that can awaken deep memories." The lady paused, studying his face. "But she only taught these methods to one person before she passed." The millionaire felt his heart race. "To whom?" "To her own daughter. That little girl knows more about waking people from comas than doctors with decades of experience." The retired nurse smiled. "But there's a problem." "What?" "She refuses to use what she knows to help rich people. She thinks you don't deserve it, that you just want to buy miracles." The lady leaned forward. "If you really want her to help your daughter, you'll have to prove that you've changed. And that means giving up what defines you, your money and your pride." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. The millionaire looked at his hands, manicured and uncalloused, then at the simple house around him. The choice that was being offered was clear: maintain his social position and possibly lose his daughter, or humiliate himself completely for a chance to save her. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "That you come work for me. Simple tasks, minimum wage. Learn to live like ordinary people. Prove to the girl that you understand the value of things that money can't buy." The retired nurse stood up. "Then maybe she'll teach you how to save your daughter." His pride protested violently, but the image of his daughter inert in the hospital bed spoke louder. That night, driving back to his empty mansion, he knew that his life was about to change in ways he never imagined. The first morning of work for the retired nurse was a humiliation that the millionaire never imagined experiencing. At 5 in the morning, he was at the door of the simple house, wearing old clothes he had bought at a thrift store. His hands, accustomed only to signing multi-million-dollar contracts and typing investment orders, trembled as he held a broom. "You're going to start by cleaning the yard," said the lady, pointing to a space filled with dry leaves and fallen branches. "Then you're going to help organize the homemade remedies I prepare for the neighbors, and in the afternoon you're going to come with me on home visits. During the first hours, Each movement was a battle against his pride. His back ached from bending over to sweep, his hands filled with blisters, and the sweat that ran down his face was bitter as gall. But it was the need to save his daughter that kept him moving the broom, even when some neighbors recognized him and began to whisper among themselves. "The millionaire hit hard times," he heard a lady comment over the wall. "They say he lost everything on Wall Street." He gritted his teeth and kept working, remembering that each hour of humiliation was one more hour that his daughter remained alive in the hospital. During lunch, the retired nurse watched him eat a simple vegetable soup, noticing how he struggled to swallow each spoonful. "Has your daughter improved any?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "The doctors say she's stable, but there are no significant changes." He paused, looking at the floor. The little urchin is still there every day talking to her. "That little girl has a heart bigger than her old house," the lady commented. "But there's something you need to know about her." "What?" "She's not alone on the streets. She takes care of a boy the same age as her, a child with health problems. That's why she refuses to leave the streets when people offer help." The retired nurse leaned forward. She would never abandon someone who needs her. The millionaire felt a pang of admiration mixed with shame. Here was a 4-year-old child, demonstrating more loyalty and compassion than he had shown in his entire adult life. "Where is this boy?" "Hidden somewhere near the hospital. He's very weak, can't walk long distances. She goes out every morning to look for food and medicine for him, then spends the day taking care of your daughter." That afternoon, following the nurse on her home visits, the millionaire discovered a world that existed just a few miles from his mansion, but could be on another planet. Houses where entire families lived in 2 rooms, where mothers worked 3 jobs to buy medicine for sick children, where solidarity between neighbors was the only safety net available. "Why do you do this?" he asked, after watching the nurse care for a child with a high fever for free. "Why don't you charge for your services?" "Because I learned a long time ago that there are things more valuable than money," she replied, putting the stethoscope in her old bag. "When you lose everything, you discover what really matters." "Did you lose everything?" "I lost my husband, my 2 sons, our house, my savings. Everything in one terrible year." Her eyes filled with old tears. "I was on the streets for months, until simple people like these helped me without asking for anything in return. I learned that true wealth is in the bonds we create, not in what we accumulate." 2 weeks later, the millionaire had sold his mansion and most of his assets to pay for his daughter's treatment. He moved to a small studio apartment in the same neighborhood where he worked, and for the first time in years woke up without checking the value of his stocks or the return on his investments. His hands, now calloused from work, trembled less when he held the cleaning supplies. It was on one of those mornings that the little urchin appeared at the retired nurse's door, carrying in her arms a thin, pale boy who could barely keep his eyes open. Their clothes were soaked from the previous night's rain, and both were shivering from cold and exhaustion. "Please," she pleaded, her voice hoarse, "he's very sick. He can't stay awake any longer." The nurse immediately took the boy from the urchin's arms and took him inside, placing him on an improvised bed in the living room. The millionaire watched as she examined the child, noting how the boy's eyes, despite his weakness, shone with a surprising intelligence. "He has a congenital condition that affects his muscles," explained the nurse after the examination. "He needs specific medications and constant care." "I can pay for the medicines," offered the millionaire immediately. The urchin looked at him suspiciously. "Why? You don't even know him." "Because," he hesitated, searching for words that didn't sound condescending, "because you saved my daughter. And because I've learned that helping doesn't need a reason." During the following days, while caring for the sick boy, the millionaire discovered that the child possessed an impressive photographic memory. Even weak, he could memorize entire medical procedures just by watching, and asked questions about anatomy and physiology that surprised even the retired nurse. "He wants to be a doctor when he grows up," explained the urchin, running her hand affectionately through the boy's hair. He always says he's going to cure all the people on the street who don't have money to go to the hospital. It's a beautiful dream, commented the millionaire. It's not a dream, corrected the boy, with a weak but determined voice. It's a promise. It was then that the retired nurse made a decision that would change everything. I think the time has come, she said, looking directly at the millionaire. You've proven you've changed. It's time to teach you and the girl to work together to save your daughter. How? The techniques her mother developed require two people, one to apply the physical stimuli and another to conduct the emotional stimuli. The lady smiled. You'll learn the technical part. She already knows the heart part. That night, sitting on the floor of his tiny studio apartment, the millionaire reflected on how his life had changed completely. His fortune was almost entirely consumed, his social position had disappeared, and he worked for a salary that he used to spend on a single meal. But for the first time in years, he felt that his life had a real purpose. The next day, when he arrived at the hospital with the little urchin, he found the doctors in a frenzy. His daughter had presented small movements during the dawn, almost imperceptible, but present. Hope, which had been just a weak flame, began to shine brighter. It's working, whispered the urchin, placing her hand on the forehead of the hospitalized girl. She's fighting to come back. But what they didn't know was that an even more surprising revelation awaited them, something that would change not only the fate of the millionaire's daughter, but of that entire unlikely family that suffering had united. The next 3 months brought changes that no one could have predicted. The millionaire had learned the retired nurse's techniques with obsessive dedication, spending entire nights studying pressure points, sound frequencies, and methods of sensory stimulation. His hands, formerly accustomed only to counting profits and dividends, now knew every muscle, every reflex that could awaken his daughter from her deep coma. The little urchin had become his constant partner in this process. While he applied the precise physical stimuli, she whispered stories and sang melodies that her mother had taught her. The combination was almost magical. On the days when they worked together, the hospitalized girl's vital signs showed significant improvements. The weak boy, who now lived with the retired nurse, had become an unlikely but valuable assistant. His brilliant mind absorbed every detail of the procedures, and he could predict when the patient was responding best to the treatments. Despite his physical limitations, he dragged himself to the hospital every day, determined to help. But it was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that everything changed. The millionaire was applying a sequence of massages to his daughter's hands when he felt something different. A light pressure, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. His eyes widened when he realized that the girl's fingers had contracted slightly. She squeezed my hand, he whispered, barely believing his own words. The urchin, who was singing softly near the headboard, immediately approached. "Sing that song your mother used to sing to you," she asked, her eyes shining with hope. With a choked voice, he began to hum a simple melody that his deceased wife used to sing to their daughter at bedtime. It was as if a miracle was happening in slow motion. The girl's eyelids began to tremble, her lips moved slightly, and finally, after 4 months of darkness, her eyes opened. "Daddy?" The word came out as a weak sigh, but it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard in his entire life. Tears streamed down the man's face as he held his daughter in his arms, feeling her heart beating against his chest. The little urchin cried with joy beside the bed, and even the weak boy, who had dragged himself there, smiled with all the strength he possessed. But the initial joy soon gave way to a new concern. The doctors explained that the girl had significant sequelae from the prolonged coma. Her motor coordination was impaired, her speech was hesitant, and she would need months of intensive physical therapy to recover basic functions. "How much will the treatment cost?" asked the former millionaire, already knowing that the answer would be devastating. With the complete rehabilitation plan we recommend, we're talking about an amount that far exceeds what's left of your assets, replied the doctor sincerely. It would be necessary to find alternatives. That night, sitting on the edge of his daughter's bed, he watched the little urchin talking softly to the newly awakened girl. It was extraordinary how the two connected instantly, as if they were sisters separated by fate. His daughter reacted only to the urchin's voice during episodes of anxiety, calming down immediately when she sang. "She's special," commented the retired nurse who had come to visit. "Your daughter recognizes in her the person who kept her connected to the world during all these months." "How are we going to pay for the rehabilitation?" he asked, his voice full of despair. The nurse smiled mysteriously. "There's something I need to show you." The next morning, she appeared at the hospital carrying an old yellowed cardboard box. "The little urchin's mother left me this before she passed," she explained, carefully opening the box. "She asked me to deliver it only when her daughter was ready to use what she learned." Inside the box was a thick notebook, full of meticulous notes on neurological rehabilitation techniques, and at the bottom, a sealed envelope. When they opened the envelope, they found a considerable amount of money, not a fortune, but enough to pay for months of basic treatment. "She saved every penny for years," explained the nurse, her eyes watering. "She said that one day her daughter would use that money to help other children like her." The urchin took the notebook with trembling hands, running her fingers over the pages covered with her mother's handwriting. "She wrote down everything she knew," she whispered. "Everything about how to help children who have been through what your daughter has been through." It was then that the former millionaire made the most important decision of his life. "We're going to use that money to create something that your mother would be proud of," he said, looking at the urchin. "A clinic where you can help other children officially." In the following months, an extraordinary transformation took place. With the money left by the urchin's mother, they rented a small space near the hospital and created a community rehabilitation center. The former millionaire worked as a cleaner during the day to pay the basic bills, and in the afternoon helped to apply the techniques he had learned. The little urchin, now 5 years old, had officially become a child therapist, supervised by the retired nurse. Her natural gift for connecting with traumatized children, combined with the knowledge left by her mother, produced results that impressed the doctors at the hospital. The weak boy, despite his physical limitations, had found his purpose helping other children with similar disabilities. His brilliant mind and personal experience made him a valuable counselor for families facing difficult diagnoses. The former millionaire's daughter became the first patient to fully recover at the small clinic. 6 months after waking from the coma, she walked again, spoke normally, and had developed a deep connection with all the children who came to the center. On a sunny afternoon, almost a year after that first desperate cry in the hospital corridor, the man who had once been a millionaire watched his daughter playing in the small garden of the clinic with other children in recovery. The little one who had been an urchin stood beside him, now wearing a small white coat, explaining to an anxious mother how the stimulation exercises could help her child. "Do you regret it?" asked the retired nurse, joining him in the observation. He looked around, at the simple but functional clinic, at the children playing despite their limitations, at the unlikely family that suffering had created. His bank account was almost empty, his mansion was a distant memory, and his clothes were simple and worn. But for the first time in decades, his heart was complete. "Never," he replied, smiling. "I discovered that true wealth is not in what we accumulate, but in what we manage to give." The little urchin approached, holding the hand of a child who had just taken his first steps after months of paralysis. "Look what we managed to do together," she said, her eyes shining with the same ancient wisdom, but now accompanied by a genuine joy. At that moment, watching his daughter running freely through the garden, the weak boy smiling while helping other children, and the little one who had saved everything applying the gifts that her mother had left her, He understood that he had found something much more valuable than all the bitcoins and stocks he once owned. He had found a purpose that transformed pain into hope, suffering into healing, and loneliness into family. The clinic grew, serving dozens of children each month, and the legacy of the nurse who had passed continued to live on through her daughter and all those she touched. And so, a story that began with despair ended with the discovery that the greatest treasures of life cannot be bought, only cultivated with love, sacrifice, and the courage to start over. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.